So that's great. What you've just told us takes us to our next slide and next point of discussion, making of a good pre-lease proposal. You've already mentioned tenant. So Sudarshan, I'd like to ask you to, pick three things that makes a good pre-lease proposal. You mentioned tenant. If you could explain with an example of a good tenant versus a bad tenant.
Perfect. So what is something which is very important is, and something which we do is we'd like to know the data of the tenant with respect to what are the financials of the tenant, how good is he? Do you think he's got that kind of infusement of funds, or is he a profitable organization, or how loaded is he on debt? Because there's a good possibility that he might leave your premises. So obviously checking the profile of the tenant is for us the most critical thing because when you go into a grade A asset in general, you go to any developers, there's a difference of 19-20 when it comes to grade A, right? Everyone has their own standards of working, which is extremely good. So what is important at the end of the day, which qualifies your investment, which is good or not, is the stability and the profile of the tenant. Because if it's something great, I think you should go all in completely. Second, in these situations, because of where we are right now, I think what is critical for me second is going to be your location. Because good location properties always have that tendency to get leased out, even if you're talking about trading at a 5-10% discount for that matter with the going rentals, there's still a possibility where you can lease these premises out completely. And the third, which is the most critical thing, which Rams had already brought out, is the terms of the deal, right? What is the lock-in? What are the escalations like? There's a good chance that tenants are now coming that let go my escalations for a year. It helps you to factor those kind of discounting factors when you decide the price at which you would want to buy the thing. So in my opinion, the top three things are your tenant, location, and the terms of how the pre-leased assets is going to be.
Right. So what would be a good tenant?
See, so for me, like I said, good tenant is obviously you can't expect a company to be debt free, but probably see a consistent growth in their cash flows. Like for instance, we managed close to about 60 crores today, 3 properties, and we were fourth, which is now currently stuck because of the COVID. I can speak about the fourth where we saw the tenant profile, a large MNC company. We've seen that they've infused 500 crores in their company 2 years back, downloaded their financials, interacted with their CFO to understand more what is their plan for the next 3-4 years. Important thing to see is, are they profitable? Has there been a growth in their sales for the last 3-4 years as a trend? Yes, you can take 1 year into consideration for any downturns in general, but otherwise, what has been the consistent growth rate and things? So this is something which is important, but in a very layman language, a greatest tenant is probably your MNC company. Second best tenant profile, if you look at, is a tenant which has spread his offices and has a business for a good number of years and in good number of locations. So these are top two, in layman language, what would qualify a good tenant.
So Sudarshan, let me ask you an add-on question. You mentioned about checking the company's financials. Are there any sites or any places where non-funded, of course, you guys, are funded, well funded, and all of that. But typically for a retail real estate consultant, are there any places to go and get these details?
Absolutely. So one very classic and the most simple thing is Ministry of Corporate Affairs. All it costs you is $100. You can download every financial for every year, mca.gov.in. Go and extract any information of every company. I mean, for listed companies and for limited companies, you have the platforms, Money Control or whatever, where you can go and track everything, or on their websites because they're obligated to share. But for private companies, MCA is the best platform. I mean, it doesn't cost you anything because normal investment in a pre-leased asset is usually upwards of 5 crores. 100 rupee cost and spending about 3-4 hours to go through the financials is definitely something which is worthy enough to do.
That's fantastic. I think we've just received a pro tip here. I'll now go on to Ram, and Ram, what would you like to say about making of a good pre-lease proposal?
For me, yes, tenant is the most important one because the premises will stay there. I would like to add to what Sudarshan mentioned is, when I am renting out, let's say if my investment is in the region of 5-10 crores, which is a substantial part of my portfolio, I am becoming a shareholder of that company, or rather I should look at as if I am the partner of the company. Are they able to sustain sustain the next 5 years or the period of the lease. So definitely you have to juggle and look into the figures of the profitability of that company. What is the market scenario for that company? What kind of products or services are they into? How are they going to look into scenario ahead? So I am considering myself as a small stakeholder in the company. How I am going to invest in shares, I will look at precisely the same reason. Only thing is my stake is very huge. Number two, I would say, so no order, Sudarshan, of which is first and second, but these are the important things that we should look at while we are dealing is the property, the quality of the asset. Which location is the asset? What is the quality? Is it a grade A building in BKC? Is it a grade A building in Andheri Kurla Road next to the metro station? Or is it a small property in Malad West, a bit offbeat from the link road? I am being very optimistic about the whole market, but when I deal, I have to deal with a bit of a pessimism saying that tomorrow, if my tenant leaves for some uncertainty, because I believe the lock-in in the agreements is as good as the deposit you hold with you. Beyond that, because of the courts and all, it is very difficult to enforce lock-ins in today. That's a practical experience. So if your property is a category property, and if this tenant leaves for some reason, even with the 5% markdown with the rental, I should be able to get a good tenant in a reasonable time of 1, 2, 3, 4 months. It shouldn't be that for a year I have to keep waiting for that new tenant to come. So I would grade location as very important. Third is how high are my property tax and CAM. Most of the time now with these multinationals, trust me, when we do this deal, they negotiate very, very hard with us. So property taxes or CAM are usually a part. So for an investor like us, if I have to bear property tax, if I have to bear CAM, and then there's certainly an income tax at the end of the year, the amount left with me has to be a good one. So vis-a-vis a good grade A asset, I will also look at a balance of what kind of monthly outgoing is there from my front. Duration is very important. The longer the duration, the happier I am. And that is the reason many people today prefer public sector banks as their tenant, because banks like State Bank of India and other banks sign 15-year agreement. In fact, there are 20 years agreement, which are lease agreement, not the legal license under the Maharashtra Rent Control Act. And mostly these banks don't go out very quickly. It's the branch, it's the face of the public for them. So they wouldn't go out looking at there's no profitability in this particular branch. So I would also look at the duration and the lock-in. The higher the lock-in, the better it is. But my recent experience, everyone, Sudarshan, Raj, and all my other fellow realtors, these days banks have started dealing at zero lock-in, and some banks I know are doing zero deposit also. So for the investor, then he has to look at what are the 3-4 top factors he will consider. Raj, over to you, Raj.
Right. Thank you. Thank you for explaining that so well, both of you. Also, so you mentioned about the outflows. So what is a good that? So the next natural question is, what is a good average yield for different kind of commercial assets? Sudarshan?
Yeah, perfect. So, I'll just speak about office and warehouse for now. Just very good pointers, just so that everyone knows also. Like I was having conversation with senior guys at Amazon. Something which COVID has done for Amazon is the next billion users which Amazon wanted to bring onto their platform are now coming at literally zero acquisition cost for them, because these guys are sitting at home. They're outreaching it to them, and these guys are now browsing through Amazon and trying to see what else is happening. A lot of other small stores are now coming on Amazon as well, because again, they see this as an opportunity to go and gobble them up to come to their platform so that they can start distributing. So something which very interestingly you see as the biggest trend and an opportunity is your warehousing and your supply chain. You see the kind of assets which are now going to get, like Amazon is very clear. We are doubling down with our capacity, which we needed till 2025. If we wanted 5 lakh square feet, now we want 10 lakh square feet, because that's the kind of an outcome we see out of this entire COVID situation, because many users which were not there have come in, right? Likewise, something which is very critical from an office space point of view, what can get hit in these situations during COVID is probably your grade B. Grade A always has that premiumness to it. Clients like it for all practical purposes. Again, you'll see a surge in IT companies moving more and more in terms of their outsourcing in India. And something which we'll cover over the next course of the discussion on the pre-COVID and post-COVID conversations. But what you'll see is you'll not see appreciation happening for the next 1.5 years. So best for you is to go out and discount that as a part of your yield calculation. The way we do it is we were earlier were out on the search for only 8% yields post registration, or even pre-registration for that matter, based on how good the location is. Like a BKC property in general is good at 7.5%, 8% for us. But having said that, now our expectations are 8.5 to 9.5% because we are factoring, the appreciation discount and trying to do that. Likewise, in warehousing, the good grade A assets today, you can look at those yields which were earlier in that 9 to 10, but now I think you should look at 10% plus upwards of transactions to come in into those things. Because again, this is something which all the big boys in the real estate as well as the BFSI space speaking is that cash is king. So if you sit on the cash, then you might as well make the most of it and try to get that pound of flesh from the seller and make a 1% higher yield in general. Yeah.
Right.
So 8 to 9, 9.5 is what you should. I mean, 9.5 is ambitious, but 8 to 9 is what I would say for an office space, and probably about 9 to 11, 11.5 for a warehousing asset is the best to be in as of now.
That's great. Ram, what about retail? Could you give us some sense
So
of
retail, I consider both high street retail and your typical banking premises on the ground floor facing a road. In typical parlance, we call it a showroom. We see a lot of conventional investor with the old mindset prefer to have banks, and you will laugh at this. I have this investor who looks at only acquiring State Bank of India branches all over the city. He doesn't even want to go outside to Navi Mumbai, Thane, and you know what? He's happy with 4.5 to 5%. The reason is his experience with this bank is they don't go and there's a fixed thing. Obviously, this guy's cost of capital is very low, or he's flush with funds. So I have found that many of the realtors, as we get this inquiry for banks at 4.5, 5, 6, 5.5 is the highest that I have been able to achieve. But I would say 5 to 6% is the retail ROI. The reason is the capital pricing of all this is sky high. If you go to, let me talk to you an example today. If you go to the high street of, let's say, Lokanwala, the shops there would be in the access region of 2 lakh rupees per square feet on carpet area, even more than that, depending on where they are. Bandra is expensive. Today, your LT Road in Borivali is expensive. Now, the companies cannot keep up to this rental level because for them, they have to do business as well. So retail has this 5 to 6%. I doubt what you said, Sudarshan, is right, that you have to be now a bit, conservative when you're buying. But retail has this thing that even if the premises, the best part with retail is your premises don't remain vacant for a long time. In fact, I can tell you for the premium high streets in Mumbai that I know of, there is a waiting list of clients to go out and the new clients to come in. So some conservative estimates, 5 to 6%, Raj, is what is our investors taking it today at.
right? And Ram, what about malls?
So mall is a very different story. What happens with mall is most of these malls are owner managed, like the Inorbits and the Infinity, and they don't go to the market to sell these as pre-leased units. What gets sold is those mall with small units of 50, 80, 100, 200, 300 square feet offices. Many of these malls that I have seen all over the country have failed as a mall and become an office for the small and medium enterprises. And then there is a food court in those malls. These kind of proposals come to at 7, 7.5, 8% sometimes. But I think there is a lot of risk here because the tenant profile is not worth putting so much of money. I would rather go into the fractional ownership part and put the money there and be happy that I am a part of a graded asset, even maybe 5%, 10%. The problem with this malls, Raj, is the maintenance are very high. So I wouldn't put any name, but there are some malls in Mumbai which are now purely office driven. And for a 200 square feet office where the rental is 35,000, the owner is paying close to 19 to 20,000 as property tax, CAM, and common air conditioning. So the returns on the mall part is not so lucrative. So in fact, because of the reason, we also see a very less inquiry for mall, unless it is a ground floor premises, road facing, which still has some value as a good retail. And there the footfall is very different, and I will have good brands always come up in those malls.
Right. Thank you.